state whose diverse landscape includes the Great Plains, hills, lakes, and forests also includes scenery embellished with paranormal activity. A hill that defies gravity, a theater where spirits roam, and a woman said to be murdered by human wolves. Join us as we explore the Oklahoma oddities. It's a well-known fact that gravity causes objects to fall at 32 feet per second. But what happens when fact and fiction collide? What happens when the laws governing our universe are thrown into reverse? In Springer, Oklahoma, there resides a gravitational anomaly known as Magnetic Hill.
We're down here in Springer, Oklahoma at the site of a plane crash that happened on April 22nd, 1966. The plane was carrying 93 military personnel. Out of the 93, only 15 survived. 5 of them were the crew. The other 10 were military people. It is rumored that the 83 who passed away on that unfortunate day are the ones who push your car backwards uphill defying gravity. People also say that a witch lives down the road and it's the victims of her witchcraft that push the car. Some people speculate that it's all just an optical illusion. It's up to you as the viewer to decide.
And what you do?
My name is Kevin Blackwood. I'm a geoscientist and instructor of Earth Science here at East Central University. Geoscience is just the study of the Earth systems. So rocks, water mainly, a little bit of atmospheric science. So Magnetic Hill is an optical illusion. It's located on the south flank of the Arbuckle Mountains. The Arbuckle Mountains come down as a very steep relief, and then where Magnetic Hill begins, the relief is a little bit more shallow. So it creates this illusion that you're actually sitting on flat ground. But it's further compounded by what's called the catoanticline, which is another positive relief feature like the Arbuckle anticline. And so because of the catoanticline, which it doesn't really look much like a hill, but it is a positive relief feature, it creates this illusion that Magnetic Hill is actually going uphill when in fact you're actually going downhill. Looking at the scientific data, we can see that where you park your car and where the car rolls to is actually going downhill. All right, so I've heard of a plane crash. It was a military transport aircraft, flew out of the Air Force Base there in Janotri, crashed further to the west of where Magnetic Hill is located. I have, yeah. I went out there one day I was probably about 10, 15 years ago. But the one thing is the frame of the illusion is starting to be lost because there's trees that are growing up along the fence line. And so you're not getting the whole periphery of the illusion. You can kind of still see it straight up in front of you. Over time, if the trees continue to grow up, become more forested, the illusion may be lost entirely. And so when you park your car at the north end of the road at Magnetic Hill, the elevation is about 975 feet above sea level, and where you end, the elevation change is closer to about 900. So you actually have a 75-degree slope over the course of about a mile, but it feels like you're going uphill. The slope is steep enough that your car, you put it in neutral, it's going to start rolling downhill. But it's the illusion because of the steepness and relief from the Arbuckle anticline behind you, and the catoanticline, which is a more gentle slope in front of you, but it's also a positive relief feature. It creates the illusion that you're going uphill.
There may be scientific explanations for the events that transpire at Magnetic Hill, but this next oddity is not so easily debunked. Residents of Kanawha tell of the legends surrounding Sacred Heart Cemetery. Red lights, apparitions, and a tombstone that reads, "Murdered by human wolves," can all be found at this historic site.
I'm Father Adrian. I'm a Benedictine monk from St. Gregory's Abbey in Shawnee. I'm here at Sacred Heart as pastor. I've been here almost 10 years now. But I've known Sacred Heart all of my life in the religious community, starting in 1960. So I'm pretty well acquainted with what has happened at Sacred Heart. It's where the two Benedictine monks, after they met up with the Potawatomi, decided that they would join with the Potawatomi in forming a school and a church for their people and their children especially. Then they got moved to Oklahoma and promised citizenship, that they knew that they needed to acclimate and needed to put themselves into this society. Had the most difficulty surviving. They came here in 1875, and they first built a few buildings down below, a log cabin, and then put up a monastery and a school for boys, primarily an industrial school, teaching them how to farm and how to make a living so that they could support their family. And by 1901, they had a large complex for the monastery and a school for boys, a church, and the sisters had their school and convent located close by. They worked along with them in forming parishes and churches all across Oklahoma, all across Indian Territory, I should say, because that was Indian Territory at that time. In January of 1901, a fire broke out and destroyed the church and the monastery and the convent. And it was a huge flame that reportedly was seen as far away as Purcell. So it's an interesting place. They rebuilt. They were building a poured concrete church, and they finished it with metal paneling. The Potawatomi have grown away from us some, but nonetheless, that's how it all started.
Like, I don't know, just catch bad feelings when you go out there. Like, stuff just, like a demonic feel almost, like something hadn't passed on.
I'm Logan Corelli. I am a longtime investigator of paranormal activity and hauntings here in Oklahoma and surrounding states. I very first became known about the Catherine Cross grave a little over 12 years ago.
I wanted to find that grave that said killed by the human wolf. Me and my buddies went out there one night, like 2 years ago. We were 16, just got our licenses. Wanted to go out there and mess around, and because we've heard many stories about how it was haunted and stuff. And so it was me and my buddy Walker, my other buddy Colton Bird, went out there and looking for that grave. It was probably about 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night.
The nearby mission also had paranormal encounters by several people. Shortly after I had found out about it, I went with a few colleagues up to the cemetery where Catherine Cross was buried, and we went out and we walked around the cemetery taking photographs and taking readings and things of that nature. And it wasn't long before one of us had noticed these strange, small red lights that were periodically appearing in the area.
So we were looking around looking for that grave with flashlights and stuff, and like you could feel chills and stuff out there. Like, you know, you could feel like something was watching you almost. You know, you had that sixth sense that somebody else was there with you and it wasn't just, you know.
So we continued on and did the investigation and came home, and when we went through the pictures, we had found that we had actually captured these red lights on camera.
We've always been told that like there's a car that will drive by like with headlights on, and you can't see the car but only the headlights, and it'll follow you. So we didn't think much about that, but you could see like a car driving around.
We thought that was very interesting. It just gave more validity to the stories of, you know, something potentially being there and things of that nature. And then after that, we had ended up going to the mission and walked the grounds and did a little bit of investigating there as well. I've only been to the mission for investigation only once at night, and it was separate from what we experienced at the cemetery. The activity was not similar. It was a lot bigger area to cover. There were structures, there was a lot of open area, and we had gone out there based on the connection with the Catherine Cross headstone, which read "Murdered by Human Wolves." And the supposed story behind that was that she had actually died of a botched abortion, and they had put that on her headstone.
My buddy wanted to keep looking for the grave, so we kept walking around. Well, we found it, and that was probably one of the most creepiest things out there because it was an old grave, probably one of the oldest ones out there. And when you're walking around out there alone, you can like hear whispers, and you can like feel stuff like touch you or something. And so by the time that happened, my buddy said he felt something touch his leg, so we kind of ran off.
Well, it had come to light that there were real life supposed stories that there were these human wolf-like werewolf creatures that were supposedly in the area. And I had worked with a psychic medium that had told me and my colleague this story about how she had gone out there and was walking around during the day. Supposedly there was this body of water, a little pond or something somewhere near the property, and they were walking around and they saw this, what they called, looked like a tall man across the water from where they were.
I jumped over the fence and we started driving, and that car got behind us, but it wasn't a car, it was just the lights. And so we hauled out of there.
They decided that they were going to turn back and go back and leave. And when they had looked back to see if the man was still standing there, this was a matter of a few seconds. He had supposedly been across the water and was running right towards them. And of course that startled them, and they started running to their vehicle, and they said that along the way they started hearing what sounded like howling, like dogs or wolves or something like that. There was multiple these howling noises as they were fleeing, and they had gotten home and got away. And a few days later or so, the woman had gotten an email from somebody that said something to the effect of, you know, you came out there to find us, and when we were singing to you, you ran like cowards, and something of that nature, something along those lines.
Some other buddy was telling me that he went out there a couple days later, him and a whole group of people. They were walking out there, and it was late. It was later than what we went out there. This was at like midnight to 1 o'clock in the morning. And he said that he was walking around out there, and he seen stuff walking around in the woods. It had like the outline of a human, but it wasn't walking. It was more of like a float, looked like almost.
There was one small building that we could gain access to, and we had went in, and we had thought it was the school or a small schoolhouse, and we had found out later it was a bakery. And there was a small group of us inside, and one of us had noticed that they thought they had heard something outside, and everybody quieted down, and it sounded as if, you know, someone was kind of walking the perimeter outside of the building. So a couple of us elected to go out and walk around, make sure no one was stalking us or you know, hiding or trying to fool us or something like that. And we didn't see anybody. So we went back into the building, and we started talking again, and we had some equipment and things. We were kind of just listening because there wasn't that much, you know, really to do. So it wasn't before long, it was quiet again, and we started hearing what sounded like multiple chains being dragged outside the building, like doing circles around the building. If you do happen to be in an area and something happens, you know, don't be so quick to dismiss it, but also don't really make it out to be something that it's not. I think in actuality, people mistake non-paranormal events for paranormal events rather than the other way around. But I do believe that some people are so skeptical that you know, they just don't want to believe.
In the face of the unexplainable, would you choose to trust your instincts or hold firm to your skepticism? Our final story takes us to Ada, Oklahoma, home of the East Central University Tigers. Students at ECU are well aware of the legends of various hauntings that lurk in every dark corner of campus, but none compare to the chilling stories of Dorothy Summers Theater. Disembodied voices, crawling shadows, and unexplained phenomenon have all been reported inside the theater. Here's what students and faculty have to say about this creepy conundrum.
I'm Bessie Meso, and I'm a musical theater major, so I spend a lot of times in the haunted theater. So my experience in the Dorothy Summers Theater started in a dark, otherwise ordinary night. I was down in the dungeon of our theater. I was alone. I checked, I was alone. I don't remember if I was looking for costumes or helping pick up after a show, but I walked back there, and no one was down here at the time. I was about to open the door, and it just kind of opened by itself. And so I looked back there, there's no one there. So I just awkwardly was like, thank you. And I went on with my business, but that was about the time when I realized there was definitely something supernatural going down. I don't know, maybe it's not a ghost. I mean, people say that it's Dorothy Summers, but I've heard that it's not Dorothy Summers, that it's someone else. So I don't know. I don't really think about it too hard. I just think it's one of those things in life you just can't explain, and I just kind of accept it and be like, that's a cool little thing that happens at our school.
My name is Susan Ingram, and I'm an instructor of mass communication here at ECU. It's actually called Science Hall, and it was the first building on campus. ECU was established in 1909, and so they started construction on the building as soon as the government established the university. And so Science Hall was actually completed in 1910. It had a theater in it when it was built. It was smaller than the current Dorothy Summers Theater is now, but it's in the same location. They've just built on over the years. And at one point, I believe it was in the 20s, the theater actually caught fire and burned. It didn't burn the whole building down, but it burned the theater part. And so then they had to rebuild the theater. After Professor Dorothy Summers was on campus for a long time, and after she retired, they decided to rename the theater in her honor. It was the main theater on campus. It was way before Hallie Brown was built, and so that's where all the productions were held. And they renamed the theater in her honor, and it's been built onto over the years to what it is right now. As far as the legends go of the hauntings, I don't really know when they originated. I know, like, legends I've heard is that, supposedly I believe it's Dorothy Summers. And I know supposedly the last production they did over there was Cinderella. It was before this building opened. And I think they had several occurrences during that production, and everyone was saying it was Dorothy Summers, and she was upset because we now had this new building and new theater where the productions were going to be held. Mainly people that have the stories are in theater productions, and that's not me. So I have not experienced it, but yes, the legend there is very well established that it can be a spooky place to be.
I'm Taylor Packwood. I am a theater major here at East Central, and I have been in this building for about a year. Well, it was during Romeo and Juliet, and some of the costumes were not finished, so I was down in the dungeon with Vicky and some other of the cast members. All of a sudden, I hear like almost a whispering, like inaudible voice. It kept happening. It happened maybe 5 times, and I went back upstairs. I was by myself, and that's not a good thing. And I hear in the next room, which has couches and other props and set pieces, and I just hear like someone's patting on the cushions, and I booked it out of there. I believe the spirits that are haunting this place is not just Dorothy. I don't fear them. I know they're there, and some may be good, some may be bad. It's spooky at sometimes, but I'm not scared. I believe the skeptics are the people who turn into non-skeptics. This is where I heard the noises coming from. This room over here, it was like, almost like they were dusting them off. I just happened to be in that room when it just started to make noise. Behind this door is the costume shop, and it's where I heard, spooky. This is where I heard the inaudible whispering. That was a little creepy.
What's going on?
I
When I started to talk about the voices, I just heard the door almost crack.
The existence of the paranormal is open to interpretation. Do not venture into something if you are not prepared for what may happen. Investigate at your own risk. Thank you for tuning in to the Oklahoma Oddities.